Chair, please take over.
A very good morning to all of you. At the outset, I thank and congratulate NICE for this wonderful webinar rather, and the wonderful work they have been doing for the last few years, as much as I know. And I consider myself privileged to be part of this very, very interesting session on Nepal's soft power. I mean, we all know how since 2004, with Joseph Nice coining the term soft power, the term has been used so many times in various international discourses on international relations, and how newer concepts have been emerged associated with the soft power like smart power. I'm sure the panelists today will look into the various dimensions of Nepal's soft power. And also, I think they will try to focus on how relevant it is to look at some of the softer issues in the power dynamics in the present international context. With this, I request the first speaker. I'll go by the program schedule that has been given to me. Each speaker will get around 8 to 9 minutes to speak, and then after all the speakers have spoken, we will take the questions and followed it by discussion. I request all the speakers to be within the time so that we have more time for discussion. The first speaker that I see in the program schedule is Dr. Leela Naichai. She will be speaking on the possibilities and difficulties of Nepal's soft power. She is an assistant professor with the Tirubhavan University. I welcome Dr. Leela Naichai for the session, and please, ma'am, you can start your presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And thank you, NICE, for giving me this platform to talk on this topic. As Madam has already pronounced, my topic is possibilities and difficulties of Nepali soft power. The power bringing the outcomes that a state wanted to have in domestic arena or in international arena through attraction is known to be soft power. Attraction, goodwill, winning mind and hearts, credibility, beliefs are the power generated by the soft power sources. Joseph Nye, as Madam has already said, focused more on creating attractions rather than creating influence by the soft power. Nevertheless, he agreed that the soft power is one source of influence as well. What are the sources of soft power then? Number one, the culture of society and the government that are expressed during the action. Number two, the political values of the country. Number three, the foreign policies of the country. The cultural value and the policies that a country express should attract others. This concept, as Nancy Snow proclaimed, is the new concept of the world habits. Public diplomacy disseminates those attractive culture, values, and policies so that a country could achieve what it wants. Nancy Snow has described several dimensions which give the soft power advantages to any country. Number one, when culture and ideas match prevailing global norms. Number two, when a nation has greater access to multiple communication channels. Number three, when a country's credibility is enhanced by domestic and international behavior. In this regards, we can see the possibilities and difficulties of generating Nepalese soft power. First of all, soft power is not something pretending to have or keeping it as a showcase. It is to be felt and received. It is the real things, behavior, attitude that prevails in our society and government. In this sense, there are less control over what we do and practices. Through many articles, Nepalese scholars viewed the urgency to work on identifying Nepali soft power sources. As Mr. Chalnath Pandey suggested, to utilize external actors for overall Nepalese foreign policy. Similar to his views, for soft power as well, it comes from state and non-state institutions of the country that work inside or outside the country. Nepali culture, its strength and weaknesses of Nepali soft power. The human inhabitant began in Nepal incorporating different groups. Nepal is the melting pot for all the immigrants from North and South, according to Vishwa Gautam 2019 in his article, Origin and Characteristics of Ancient Nepal. Another appreciable part of Nepali culture is the tolerance and respect to all the existing religions, behaviors, and culture. Nepal has multiple ethnicity and different ecology according to which varieties of values and meaning existed from very long history. There is no serious violence erupted against each other. living in multiplicity, accepting the multiplicity, and including all the communities in state organism is the most attractive and powerful Nepali soft power. Among the SAARC countries, this mutual respect and understanding is comparatively praiseworthy culture of Nepal. However, the unequal priority to our minority ethnic groups and the less priority to our minorities' language, literatures, religions are major challenge for making multiculturalism as the soft power. Every symbol, foods, custom, or ornaments, languages, literature should be developed as the national or nationwide things. Only considering Nepali language, Khas culture, and Hinduism as the national things won't support developing whole Nepali culture as the soft power. Author Sanjeev Shakya, in his article Unleashing Nepal's Demography as a Soft Power, published in Journal of Foreign Affairs, described how the patriarchal Nepali society gradually welcomed women's participation as bottom-up inclusiveness in political, administrative, and decision-making position after 1980s. According to him, at present, 22.5% working age women are employed in formal sector and 66.5% are employed in informal sector. The growing working women force is Nepali soft power. Promoting women in various sectors is the aspirational quality of Nepali society. But on the other side of this coin, the author pointed the wage gaps between male and female worker, lack of the social security, lack of exposure and training, family penalty during motherhood, particularly in informal sector where majority of Nepali women are employed, are the challenging part to be utilized as the source of attraction. Similarly, the miserable condition of Nepali women workers in foreign lands are also grave situation that harms for being Nepali soft power. Nepali literature in all languages of Nepal and their literature is the strong pillar for Nepali for developing our own soft power. World-known philosopher Buddha is the great source of Nepali soft power. Buddha and his disciples propounded philosophy of Buddhism. Binod Kanda Timil Sena 2020 has also identified Buddhism as the key attraction of Nepali soft power sources. Nepal has the university dedicated to Buddhism. Buddhism is not limited to religious domain, rather it is expanded to philosophy and way of thinking. Moreover, the Buddhist Gumbas and Bihar of Nepal were flourished as the research and study center in Nepali history. Even today, Buddhist followers have good practice of study, so they should be kept on the academic research and study center, which will contribute developing them as Nepali knowledge generation center. Knowledge is the greatest source of soft power. Ignorance of systematic study of our philosophies like Buddhism, Hinduism, nature-based philosophies are also weaknesses for enhancing Nepali soft power sources. As the author Phunchok Stobdan pointed, Buddhism has been the issue of geoculture for India and China. For Nepal, we should develop purely as the philosophy of Nepali society. Similarly, author Sweta Karki and Ghana 2020 have suggested the ideals of democracy, pluralism, and welfare state and human rights as the source of Nepali soft power. The everyday news of the lack of the good governance, good implementation of the practices of democracy and human rights are the hiccups for Nepali soft power. Nepali natural resources, beautiful landscape, wildlife, flora and fauna are also Nepali soft power. Our natural and cultural heritages stood for branding Nepal. Nepali education system, educated persons, scholars represent modern Nepali society. Education is the higher form of culture. As Joseph and I mentioned, that there is difference between power measured as resource and power judged by the outcomes of behavior. The outcomes of behavior are the important things. No matter how much resources of soft power we have, the vital thing is how successfully they are utilized for achieving the attraction to our Nepal in favor of Nepal's national interest. Access to multiple communication channels for Nepal. Just as BBC, CNN, Voice of America, Al Jazeera, CGTN are some well-known media houses, but Nepal has fewer worldwide media. However, the printed media, online media, FM radio, number of television channels are the hopeful sources of soft power. In order to propagate or broadcast the national soft power, the numerous communication channels are essentials. The increasing digital communication channels are providing the worldwide access. Interpersonal network, particularly of those elites, business persons, intellectuals, scholars, are very important source of Nepali soft power. Nepali diaspora in various parts of the world are another significant communication channel. And Nepal's credibility is enhanced by domestic and international behavior. Credibility is the huge soft power. Keeping one's promises, either in domestic issues or international issues, very important soft power. The person who cannot say no will not implement things for which he or she says yes to. It also applies for a country as well. Only doing lip servicing by our political leaders, states, representative bureaucrats, and delaying the implementation to those agreements harm a lot for establishing the credibility. The working culture in government apparatus is too poor in this matter. In an article, Nepal's Policy and Strategy for Connectivity by Chinese professor Feng Liping 2021 wrote, due to its geographical position, Nepal has always lived in the shadow of two Asian powers, always hoping to play one against another to get a better deal. From time to time, Nepal has flirted with China, but always remained closely engaged with India. Her statement gave the tone of being less trustworthy Nepal for China. This sort of reflection is the failure of Nepal's soft power. The habit of using bad words among political leaders while criticizing one another is also a threat for Nepali soft power. Nepal has very less advantages of having world's attraction to our Nepali leaders and Nepali government heads' speeches in international arena, for example, as we found in Malaysia's leader, Mohammad Mahathir, Cuba's Fidel Castro, Pakistan's Imran Khan, India's Modi, and China's Xi Jinping, and so on. In summary, Nepal has huge for Nepali soft power, and parallelly, Nepal inherent weaknesses promoting those soft powers, utilizing them to the desired outcome. There is an urgent need to have a special division in MOFA that looks for soft power and public diplomacy. It will contribute among all the sectors that could generate soft power and disseminate using tools of public diplomacy. These are based on my views and some of the information I have retrieved from Nepali scholars' article as well. Thank you. If any question, I would welcome all of them. Thank
you. Thank you, Dr. Leela Naitai. It was really wonderful of you to keep within the stipulated time, and you have described the various facets of Nepal's policy, Nepal's soft power, and the challenges that it faces, and also given some suggestion like how a special division in the foreign ministry could be helpful. Thank you so much for your paper. Now I request the next speaker, Bhuvan Bhatta, who is a section officer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Nepal, and he would be speaking on projection of soft power case of Nepal. Now, sir, if you could kindly start your presentation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Pramod Jaiswal and NICE Nepal for this wonderful opportunity. So at the outset, let me just clarify my limitations. I'm not like involved in academic research or anything like that. So unlike Dr. Leela, I may not provide this rich resource of literature on this soft power and other like citations. So I will basically focus on some practical issues. For example, so how can Nepal project its soft power? So as Dr. Leela already mentioned, soft power is basically about a country's ability to get preferred outcomes through three behaviors. This is just a modified definition given by Joseph Nye. He focuses on three state behavior: agenda setting, persuasion, and attraction. So I will be focusing on how Nepal in particular can project her soft power across the global arena in these three lines, like what kind of agenda should she set, how can she persuade, and how can she attract. So talking about the first behavior, agenda setting. Now, what could be Nepal's agenda? Unlike, let's say, superpowers, maybe US or emerging powers, our agenda has to be basically our domestic aspirations. We want economic development. That is our priority. That's our agenda. And of course, like as a member of this international community, which believes in democracy, human rights, equity, and justice, our other priorities could be promotion of human rights, promotion of democratic governance, gender equality, and other relevant issues that are of global concern. But primarily, as a country which is like aspiring to have to give its people a better quality of life, we should have that agenda in our mind that our main goal is economic development, and that needs to be reflected in our like domestic, sorry, the foreign policy behaviors as well. So I will focus on basically how we can project this soft power, uh, considering our agenda, that is economic development. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, uh, unlike other powers of the world, we don't have material or military resources. So the only resources available to us are what Dr. Lila already mentioned, like maybe the religion, culture, uh, people, and this natural beauty and all that. So these are the resources we have. So what we are supposed to do is we are supposed to develop specific tactics uh, by which we can somehow use these resources to project our power. And again, let me reiterate: our projection of power is not uh, related to, like persuading, or let's say uh, coercing others, or let's say making other do what we want. It is basically about what is good for Nepali people in general. How can there be economic development? That's where I think we need to focus. And for that, we need specific tactics. We need to focus on what exactly we want to project, what kind of brand we want to we want to create for our country. So for that, uh, then the next question arises: who are the actors for that? I mean, who can do that? The first thing we need to understand is projecting your power as multidimensional features along with it. First of all, you have got some actors, some agents who contribute in creating that brand that you want for your country. So, formally, diplomats are one such actors who can create a brand Nepal abroad. So what they can do is they can involve in like meaningful engagements with foreign community. They can involve in proactive promotion activities, and they can somehow, uh, you know, create a national image outside. But then in our context, are we capable enough for that? Are our diplomats equipped enough to project that kind of image outside? Probably not. So what policymakers or what our people in power need to realize is you need to invest. You need to make sure that diplomats do have resources with them as well. For example, if I'm abroad, I'm currently in serving in Embassy of Nepal here in Middle East. So if I want to promote my country, do I even know everything about my country? Do I have the experience of going out and exploring the landscape of my country? Do I have enough knowledge about the history, religion, culture of my country? That's what we need to understand. So maybe Ministry of Foreign Affairs and concerned agencies need to be clear that they need to first invest in the diplomat, in the foreign service officers. They need to like somehow create a situation in which they have something with them, which they can take with them outside, and maybe in their engagements, spread that out. That is one thing we need to consider. And another actor, another like channel through which we can create a brand Nepal outside is our diaspora community. Talking about diaspora community, Nepali diaspora community is largely, it consists of laborers. If you talk about Middle East, wherever you go, you find Nepali people, but then they are mostly in menial jobs. If you like happen to visit airport, you will find Nepalese there, but they might be sweeping floors, they might be cleaning bathrooms and all that. Or most of the time, Nepali laborers are basically unskilled laborers, as we say. So you need to take this into consideration when you talk about using diaspora community for, creating a brand Nepal outside. So what I'm trying to tell here is, basically, you need to make sure that your diaspora has some, something with them that can help promote Nepal outside. If you are talking about foreign employment, make sure that there are skilled workers who are going abroad, who has managerial positions, so that they can influence people outside. If you think that like laborers can influence people outside, that might not be possible. And similarly, in like Western countries, maybe Australia, America, or Great Britain, your diaspora, you need to see whether they are capable enough in influencing, those in creating some sort of influence in those countries. So we need to make sure that our diaspora has got that vibrant quality, which can, somehow influence people abroad. Now we have these informal organizations, NR and all that. So are they really necessary, or do they have that kind of strength to influence Nepal outside, influence to like influence people outside? We need to reconsider that. We need to make sure that our diaspora gets some kind of anchor in promoting Nepal outside. And of course, other entities like non-governmental organizations, INGOs or NGOs, through them also we can promote Nepal. And other like the major actors could be eminent personalities, those who have got their own reputation, those who are considered institutions in their field. They might somehow be the agent through which we can create, a brand Nepal outside. So basically, through these actors, if we can adopt an efficient and effective model of diplomacy, we can project our soft power abroad. So maybe we need to adopt specific type of diplomacy, unlike others. So what we need to focus on is how we can project Nepal's image outside. But as I say, having said that, we need to make sure that our own domestic, condition is capable enough for such kind of promotion. Like we always say we have got a good culture, but then do we really have? I mean, are there some problems here and there?
I'm sorry to intervene. If you kindly wind up.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry, ma'am. So for the delay. So finally, what I would like to tell you is projection of soft power abroad is basically related to capacity enhancement domestically, and then only we can project our soft power abroad. Thank you very much.
I do understand it present such a issue, many issues in such short time is difficult. But as a chair, I had to intervene. But thank you for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you.
And you have really brought out so nicely some of the practical issues that Nepal is facing in projecting its soft power in the international scene, and the various actors in branding Nepal. And I'm sure there will be more questions to follow what you have said, and we can hear from you more in the discussion round. And now I request Mr. Vinod Khanda Timilsana. He is going to present on soft power in Nepal's foreign policy. He is a PhD scholar from the Department of University. Mr. Vinod, if you could kindly start your
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam
presentation.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just I'm going to start my presentation. Soft power in Nepal's foreign policy has got place. Am I audible now? Yes. Has got place in Nepal foreign policy laterally. In my presentation, just I will try to sum up what sort of policies Nepal has adopted regarding soft power in its recent amendments and in its recent reports. Before elaborating these, soft power exists separate in the discourse formally after Bound to Lead, published in 1992 by Joseph Nye. We all are informed about it. And soft power is an iconic word in this world at this time among political scientists, political leaders, policymakers, scholars, academia, researchers, and other stakeholders. So many are attracted toward the whole soft power. And the soft power is basically very important for small powers like Nepal, because Nepal has a great opportunity and great efficiency efforts due to its attraction and persuasion rather than coercion in the international arena. That's why soft power should be and would be a better power dimension of small states and small powers like Nepal. Because hard power is a push and soft power is a pull. And as a small power, Nepal always has to pull the international actors, international great powers and major powers towards its for the domestic benefit, for the national interest, and for its protection, its sovereignty as well. That's why soft power is a very important tool for Nepalese foreign policy. Even though there is very difficult to get a smooth and written national objectives as well as foreign policy objectives of Nepal. However, in 2020, Nepal has declared 9-point foreign policy objectives. Among these objectives, the 9th point objective, the one single point, is there about soft power. I want to read this one objective. What the objective is this: to promote soft power by utilizing the country's unique natural beauty, indigenous and rich civilization, culture, lifestyle, diversity, arts, languages, literature, and sports. This is the declared objectives of Nepal's foreign policy by Foreign Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And how far objectives have been achieved. How the soft power has been utilized to promote its national interest, to promote its national benefits, and promote international relations. How Nepal has been done. For this, Nepal just has entered into the evaluative form, because in 2021, just Brand Finance has ranked the soft power ranking countries, and Nepal has included in 95th position. In this position, according to Global Soft Power Index 2021, the Brand Finance has categorized the universe of various countries from Europe, Asia, North America, Australasia, Middle East, Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, and so forth. Among them, Germany has got the first position in global rank. first rank. Japan, the Asian country, Japan has got second position. Canada has got fourth. Australia has got 10th position. UAE has 17th position. Brazil from Latin America has got 35th position. South Africa from Sub-Saharan Africa has got 37th position. And respectively, the Nepal has got 95th position, 95th rank. Then how can Nepal enhance its soft power in international dimension, in global index? Because the global index has built up on the various indicators such as familiarity, reputation, influence, business and trend, education and science, media and communication, people and culture, people and values, culture and heritage, and so forth. And among these indicators, Nepal has a good score in reputation. Nepal has good reputation in the soft power indexes. However, Nepal has to do progress or do something effective measures to get more ranking in terms of education and science, in terms of media and communication, in terms of international relation, in terms of business and trade. Basically, business and trade, media and communication, education and science are below the average to compare to the other countries, those who are included in the rank. So Nepal should have tried to enhance its soft power by various means and resources. For example, Nepal, Buddha, the Buddha, Lumbini and Buddha. Buddha was born in Nepal, and he is the great soft power for Nepal. Hindu religion, Pashupatinath, Muktinath, and so forth. Religious properties are also the great soft power of Nepal, and Nepal need to mobilize them to the international arena. Similarly, natural beauty, Mount Everest, and so forth. These are very important ingredients of Nepalese soft power. Similarly, tourism and unique culture, Nepal, which has got is another dimension, another resources of soft power. Similarly, one thing we need to quote it here that Nepal has adopted a political value, a kind of new political value. Some sort of political values are carried from capitalist political perspective, and some sort of political values are adopting from socialist perspective. And that's why a kind of newly adopted values are being incorporated in the newly formed constitution of Nepal. That is also a new political value which Nepal has adopted, and it is to be exposed to the international community. Similarly, media, online media, and television channels from all over the world, CNN, BBC. These are the medias which are popularly diagnosed in Nepal, but Nepalese media should also have an approach to international community, and imminent community should also have mobilized to extend our Nepalese soft power. Similarly, non-government organization, similarly diasporic community spread all over the world should use and should advocate about the Nepal's resources, Nepal's soft power, Nepal's potentiality, and such that Nepal can attract whole community towards Nepal. And Nepal's foreign policy objectives can only achieve if Nepal can mobilize such soft power resources in international arena by its formal and informal channels, by its public diplomacy, by its formal diplomacy, by economic diplomacy, and so forth, such that Nepal should have to do many things to get the objectives as mentioned in foreign policy regarding soft power. Thank you, ma'am. This is my presentation about Nepal's foreign policy and soft power. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Timilson, for this very comprehensive presentation. You have very rightly pointed out the need for Nepal to use its soft power in its international approach to make it more visible, and also how different actors or different soft power dimensions of Nepal, like religious soft power, or that the natural beauty that Nepal has, and also how media can be used to present Nepal in the international scenario. So thank you for this wonderful presentation. Now I request, I don't know whether Ms. Matrika Pudal is present. Otherwise, we'll go to the second. If she is present, if she could just kindly tell that she is here. Okay. In that case, we'll go to the next presenter, Mr. Vijay Prasad Jaiswal. He is an assistant professor at Tribhuvan University. He will be speaking on narratives of soft power discourse in Nepal's foreign policy priorities. Mr. Jaiswal, if you could kindly start your presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, ma'am. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I have seen the few names who are representing a different jurisdictions. Let me first thank to NICE Nepal for giving me this opportunity to share my thoughts on narratives of soft powers in soft power discourse in Nepal's foreign policy priorities. So I would briefly make 5 points that will justify my hypothesis, saying that not adequate work is done to access the powers of softness in foreign policy priorities in Nepal. And I do agree with all the statements made by my foreign presenters and resource workers. And I'm in between. I'm academic in the international relations sectors, not in the practitioners. So how I do on my own research found that these are the 5 brief points that is very much needed in order to really access the foreign policy priorities in terms of soft power in Nepal. So the first point is that, as we all do agree, diplomacy is not only a form that is only confined to the academic discourse, and it has a practical utility, what we generally call diplomatic calculus. So we must be aware about the fact that where is our Nepal soft power diplomatic tools in this diplomatic calculus. So that is not adequately addressed, and previous speakers were also mentioning very similar point. Second point is that whether the narrative of soft powers in Nepal is accurately projected and presented to the international forum. Hence, don't know how much this how much the Everest of the religious sources has been contributed to build our diplomatic relations meaningfully. So it is very much essential to know whether there is a material contributions needed, or whether there is a material contributions done by so far in the soft power discourse in Nepal's foreign policy priorities. So there is much more timely needed there to have a very meaningful study for the real evaluations of soft power contributions to the diplomatic relations. That's time and again we're talking about that Nepal is trying to achieve it. The third point here I would like to make is that whether the sources of Nepal's soft power is really it's of ours, or is been a time and is been refuted unless adjusted by our neighborhood. So hence we are not sure whether the position that we are talking today in terms of soft power is really playing on true or the original or in the original sense. For example, I can give you an example here. When we talk about the Lumini as a birthplace of Buddha, exactly whether these things have been widely or accurately accepted by our neighborhood or not. When we talk about the Hinduism is a great asset for Nepal's soft power policy, is it exactly projected, and does these values help anywhere to reach or to achieve our diplomatic relations in the international forum? So the fourth point is that whether if Nepal has the only one tool left that we are time and again talking about, since we are not militarily, economically sufficient, well adequate to deal in the international forum in terms of building our foreign relations based in our mutual interest, based in our different priorities in foreign policy. So there is always a strategic doubt whether these narratives have been well coordinated and well engaged with the foreign policy scholars, practitioners, either academic or not. And what I do personally believe, when we talk about the diplomacy, or when we talk about the soft power discourse, it has a very practical utility. For example, whether the foreign policy or whether the soft power discourse has really brought the foreign investment, does had helped anywhere to enhance the foreign capital engagements? Does this foreign policy has brought it the development in our discourse? Whether it has enhanced the diplomatic relations among the different nations or not? So when we come at the very practical level, the soft powers is not only what we academic do discuss at the academic level. It has a practical value, but since there is very lack excess assassins as well, there's very lack inadequate research have been done in Nepal to really evaluate the soft power discourse that will support building our diplomatic relations. And another point I would like to make here is that when we talk about the Nepal's diplomatic relations, time and again we generally call it Nepal foreign policy priorities are always defined as a strategy for the survival. So it is not only that we are dealing with our north and the south partners, but equally Nepal do engage in the different for different international multilateral forum. But how those forums are giving positions to the Nepal independence foreign policy priorities are time and again needed, and that's very much needed to have a very proper evaluations. Coming from a legal backgrounds, I have seen how the foreign policy priorities have been reflected in the different constitutions of Nepal, starting from 2004, then followed by 7, 15, 46, 63, and 72. So these all constitutions have given a very narrative, a very consistent narrative that we have time and again. We talk about Nepal must follow the non-alignment policy, but what about the other nations who had propounded it and not following it very literally? So it is not only that Nepal must confine with the international law and the international rules, but the others, if they are not well positioned, Nepal must also look for some other alternatives. So when we always talk about the Nepals do have only the soft powers in dealing with the relations, whether our soft powers have been literally endorsed by the international fora or not. For example, with time and again give the example of Everest, and then these Hindu religions and this our cultural diversity. So how much these all diversities have been able to really contribute or enhance the economic prosperity of this nation is very much needed. And lastly, I would like to say, as we know that if you see these all facts that I say, where our diplomatic relations how these soft powers is helping us in the international fora is open secret. When we deal at the international fora, we always try to get the assistance from the other nations. So we are not even positions to say that, okay, these things have been literally well narrated in our public discourse in relations to the soft power agencies. So it is very much needed, and this is my own work while doing a research on the soft power discourse, or very different narratives that is built in our public domain. It is very much needed to establish. I do agree with Dr. Leela. She was sharing with us that there has to be a separate department that will access at least soft power discourse, and that will provide different projections while dealing at the international fora. Not only at the Department of Ministry of Foreign Affairs, but there is a need to establish a different resource centers like what the NICE is doing, along with some other research centers adequately in the different universities, so they can have at least the students of the academia can do well engaged along with the practitioners while dealing with this soft power discourse in the international forum, or while dealing at the different forum. So it is very much needed to reorient ourselves for the soft power discourse that we are really building or debating in academia or in practitioners are really reflecting the pragmatic approach to the diplomatic relations or not. Otherwise, it would be much more softness in the soft power priorities in Nepal discourse, and literally it would be only limited, and we want to be in positions to really access where is the contributions made by the soft power narratives in Nepal diplomatic relations. And thank you so much for listening. I made very short points, madam. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. You are all well within the time. Thank you for that. And very, very nicely pointing out the debate and discourse that should take place in any country's projection of soft power, where you have very, very rightly pointed out that there need to be the narrative on soft power in a country has to be well coordinated and projected, without which, how much we talk of soft power will not have any influence. Whether soft power issues are actually bringing benefit to the country, or it is actually creating an image building of the country outside. And rightly, you have also suggested some of the ways that things can be improved, like a new division in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and also a research center where there can be a more focused research on Nepal's soft power and what actually the narrative has done in the foreign policy dynamic. And rightly, you've also pointed out, I really like the comment that softlessness in soft power, which will actually bring out a lot of issues when we look at soft power discourses in international relations. I think with this, we end with the presentation. I think the other presenter, Matrika Podal, is not here. So the floor is open for discussion. I don't see any question in the chat box yet now. If the host could kindly tell me if there are questions they have, or I will start the question answers with a few of my comments and questions. Anyone from NICE who could just guide me if there are any questions that you all have received from.
Okay, ma'am, you can go ahead with your questions.
Yeah. Okay, okay.
We are retrieving the questions from Facebook, so it might take a while.
Fine. So I will pose, to all the four presenters short question based on their presentation. So the first question is to Dr. Leela, where you have very rightly mentioned the very interesting, which also that gender dynamics and soft power. We have spoken about how women could be, a phase of the soft power dynamics. If you could just elaborate on that. And you've also mentioned about the education and how education can play a role in the soft power projection of a country. If you could kindly elaborate on that. I will pose the question together to all the panelists, and then you all can answer one by one. Then my second question would be to Mr. Bhuvan Bhatta. Thank you for that very, very practical presentation that you have given, and that is based on, I think, some of your own practical experience as a person from the ministry. I think you have also mentioned, the various actors which can play a great role in branding Nepal's soft power, where you have mentioned role of eminent personalities. If you could kindly elaborate on that, how do you think the eminent personalities can be roped in to influence Nepal's soft power in the international arena? And also, you have mentioned about diaspora, where you have said that it is mainly the Nepalis who are doing the manual work outside. How this can be more used in a more systematic and a structured way in Nepal's soft power dimensions. My next question is to Mr. Timil Sana. You have presented your presentation was basically in Nepal's soft power in Nepal's foreign policy. If you could kindly elaborate, you have mentioned very nicely, what are the various dimensions of Nepal's soft power, which needs to be used more nuancedly, even in projecting Nepal's soft power image, like religious soft power or natural beauty and others. If you could just elaborate, how do you think Nepal's soft power is, how do you see Nepal being able to use soft power in its foreign policy dynamics in a more focused, in his relation when he's discussing in any negotiation? Has it been very very strongly propagating soft power, or is there any more nuanced way of handling that? My next question is to the last speaker, Mr. Jaiswal. You have very critically reviewed the question of soft and soft power. You have raised the question also whether it is bringing in foreign investment, whether it is bringing in any development. Do you see that there's a new narrative now, whether to see all these things in this power dynamics, lens of power dynamics, or, when the moment we use the word power, it is value laden. It is then there is someone high, someone low. It comes, but the word power is value laden. So today there are discourses on, rather than using hard power, soft power, smart power, there's a concept like mutual power or knowledge diplomacy. I think this term has been used in a number of articles by I'm forgetting her name, Jane Knight, where she has spoken about how education can be used as knowledge diplomacy rather than looking at it in the concept of this power dynamics. If you could kindly throw your views on this. I request all the speakers to go by the the sequence of their presentation to one by one to present their views.
Thank you, madam, for the nice questions to me. Regarding to being the Nepali women as a source of soft power, I would like to mention an example of my own experience. Like after the 2006 political changes, we have Nepal has given the 33% reservation in new constitution as well. And this is the new thing for the whole world, I think. And I myself was interviewed by the many international researchers regarding how we are feeling after having these changes in constitutions. I mean, it attracts the world's attentions. Like, how does it work now in Nepal after giving the inclusive proportion to the women's participation? Though I have already said that there are so many shortcomings regarding the women's empowerment and the participations in the state organization. But yes, of course, we should agree that the more participation and meaningful participations of Nepali women in different arena of the state organism or the administration decision level will be the good case for developing the soft power of Nepal in this regards. And the second question that you have said, how can we make the education as a soft power? Education, if we give the proper attention to the development of quality education, then we could have the exchange of student, exchange of scholar is one of the good apparatus to have the long-term relationship with the foreign peoples. And those students and scholars are obviously will be some potential leaders of the countries in different sectors, and relationship making network with those people through education and through scholars will be the good channel. As presenters, other presenters also said that this sort of connection with the educated persons will enhance our own emails. And not only emails, we can have the good communication network with them when time comes, when the relevant time comes, we can have connection with them and have work done as we want. And as they are attracted to us, it is possible too. And there are so many cases like even United States of America and any other great powers are also using the education, internationalization of educations to have their own attraction towards other country and people. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, Dr. Leela.
Ma'am, thank you for the question. Maybe because of technical problem, I couldn't understand second part of your question. Could you please repeat that one? The second question.
I first part was the role of eminent personality. How do you think they can be used? The second part is, your comment on the diaspora, that you said the Nepali diaspora outside. They're mainly engaged in not in skilled sector, they're in unskilled sector. How do you think that, I mean, the government can utilize this diaspora in a more effective way to project Nepal's soft power?
Thank you for the question. So regarding this eminent personalities, how can they promote Nepal abroad? As we all understand, a person, a nationality of someone has a kind of, metonymous effect on the person who is interacting with him. If there is a Nepali guy, the other person tends to make an image of that country as per the interaction he has with that person. So what I mean by how eminent personality can contribute in this is maybe through, like networking, informing or publishing, or using different kind of forums where they participate. By networking, I mean eminent persons are supposed to have some kind of global connectivity among different scholars or different professionals abroad. So they might have that advantage in spreading, maybe positive image or realistic image for that matter of the country. And of course, they can inform through talks or through some other medium. And other could be publishing in like, foreign journals or newspapers, any information or any typical aspects of Nepal which nobody knows. And of course, they can use other forums where they participate. Now, related to Nepali diaspora, what I mean was the kind of diaspora we have might not be ideal one to promote the brand Nepal outside. So what we need to do is we need to ensure that most of those who go outside are skilled. They have got this capacity to contribute meaningfully, in different sectors. That way, they can have some weight and they can somehow influence people there. But then if you have like simply manual workers, people tend to, just take that for granted. Like, for example, whenever we discuss and meet authorities here in Middle East, their only focus is please provide us domestic workers. So you can understand the implication. So when they say provide us domestic workers, you can imagine what kind of image they have. So we need to like break away from that image. We need to give, like India has high-rated manpowers abroad. Even in Middle East, they are in managerial positions. They are in like middle-level managerial positions. So those people influence image of the country. And similar model we need to adopt. I mean, for manual workers, let's try to create jobs within the country. And if someone wants to go abroad, let's make sure that they are skilled ones, so that they can have a role in promoting Nepal outside. Thank you, madam. Thank you for the question.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your insight. Thank you. Dr. Timilson, if you could kindly comment.
Yes, please, ma'am. Thank you for your question. Nepal has just entered into evaluative form of soft power application and its implementation in international arena. It's already I mentioned, because it has got the 95th rank in all ranking in terms of soft power. In my presentation, just I would like to elaborate that Buddha and Buddhism is a great and indistinct tool of soft power for Nepal, because nearly 10% of the world population is Buddhism still now, and they are widespread all over the world. And as a birthplace of Buddha, Nepal is a destination to visit by these Buddhist religious people. And this is one of the great opportunities for Nepal. If we can elaborate it about Buddha and his philosophy and his birthplace, if we can expose it to the international community, then definitely it will help to Nepal to enhance its tourism, to enhance its economic sector, and so forth. One is the very important thing is this. Besides, side by side, we should have to enhance our Hindu temples, for example, Pashupatinath in Kathmandu, Muktinath in the Himalayan range in Mustang district nearby the Chinese border. There are various sports which are very attractive places for the people, basically the peoples from the southern part of Nepal, especially from India. Millions of and thousands of millions of people can come Nepal to visit, and it definitely will promote the Nepal's soft power and Nepal economic development as well as tourism sector. That's why this is another part. And the diasporic community is another very important tool to resources to elaborate Nepal's soft power to all over the world. For example, in Australia, so many students, Nepalese students are there in various universities of the Australian universities, and from the latter data, we can get that the revenue generator, Nepalese students are the great revenue generator of the Australian economy as well. That is a very important thing we need to be noticed it, and the students, the diasporic community definitely share the Nepal's culture, language, tradition, its get-offs and so forth. So many things that we have got, and just diasporic community are the tools to spare the Nepalese tradition, Nepalese attraction they can provide to other community, and it will be a beneficial one thing, diasporic community. And similarly, the media and social sites, social media, Nepalese are the very good users of social media as well. And this is also the one of the most important resources to elaborate Nepalese soft power to international community. And the Nepalese peace process model, we should not forget to elaborate the Nepalese peace process model. It has got a very indistinct value in the land, as well as it will be a model to the international community as well to settle the internal type of conflict. When the African model is a very useful and widespread model to all over the community and all over the world, then why Nepalese model and Nepalese peacekeeping, peace process model is not widespread? This can also a very good learning example for all over the world, I think. And some sort of evidences we can get that once upon a time, the Afghani team headed by a minister probably was visited in Nepal at that time to learn from the peace process of Nepal, how can Afghanistan get the peace settlement and can settle the internal type of conflict in Afghanistan land. That's why Nepalese peace process model should also be elaborated and exposed to the international community so that we can use as a soft power resources of Nepal. That is my point, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your enlightening insights. Thank you. Dr. Jaiswal, if you could kindly give your comments.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. I do agree with your statement. I mean, we have to be very much sure that how the power narratives are built in the international relations. So the way we do perceive about the hard powers is not very similarly the way the scholars and the practitioners along with the academics do perceive about the soft powers. But what I do personally believe is that when we talk about the foreign policy of a particular state, it has to have a very practical utility. For example, if we say the soft powers, I can give you the example, you may agree with me, when we say the yoga, how India projected yoga at the international levels. And today in the different universities, yoga has become a discipline. So in somehow, even in Indian university, people are coming from the outside, doing certain study in the yogic science and those all things. So that has a value, right? If we say a Buddhist, I mean, if you consider Buddhism is the soft power of Nepal, how many universities are providing the degree or the non-degree or the academic course on this study? How many foreigners are coming here to study the Buddhist study? So if we really consider tourism, those are the seasonal things. in foreign policy, we do not look for the thing that comes in the seasons, right? It is a very sustainable tools. So in that way, that is very much needed to do. And another, I say, if you see the tools of soft powers that Nepal has time and again used, is much more of informal nature. For example, how I have not seen in any international forum where Nepalese diplomats are saying, okay, let's have an international Buddhist like summit. Few are there, but that has not contributed. Those are coming in a personal basis. So a state has to take it as a means of a statecraft, not as a means of like, okay, if Pramod Jaiswal is working in India, he can do it on his own, like a personal basis. That is not what the priority that generally we see in the foreign policy in any particular country. And lastly, I would like to say, we must look for the sustainable tools in the foreign policy priority. So I'm not disagreeing with what the previous speakers are saying. What my contention here is that whether the softness that we are talking about under our foreign policy priorities have been really understood in a right way by the international forum or not is my concerns and observation, ma'am. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this very academic point of view. I mean, it's very essential to have narratives. That is only the only way we can bring about changes, or we can bring about newer dimensions to this concept, to the earlier concepts. Thank you so much. We have few questions in the chat box. It is not the speaker to whom they have identified. The question is not mentioned, so anyone among the speakers can answer. I'll go one by one. The first question is, how can soft power discourse be incorporated in Nepal's foreign policy? Is soft power really a means to success in world politics? I'm repeating, how can soft power discourse be incorporated in Nepal's foreign policy? Is soft power really a means to success in world politics? Any one of you can volunteer, or all of you can say it in one or two sentences. It doesn't matter.
Professor, may I?
Have time. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, so how do I perceive all this question is that it is not about success in the world politics, right? And do you consider US is successful in the world politics? Definitely not. So when we try to see international relations of the foreign policy, we must not forget one point: what is the national interest at that particular time of that particular country? For example, when there was a recent trade war between US and China, some scholars are saying that US is successfully able to deal and make a balance in trade relations. So we can consider at that aspect that is there, that is successful. Even we can say Nepal is very successfully maintaining our foreign relations, because being in a very different position geopolitically, at least we are still independent. Otherwise, there is always chance that's being very close to India. I mean, culturally, linguistically, we have a very cultural relations. That's what if there be some other nations in the same size with a different ideology? What about the North? So at that context, at least we can say that being a small state, I mean, in a very perspectives, although a small state do have their own positions in the international relations, but practically saying there is no point of successness in the world politics, we must have a very well and pragmatic ideas that at particular context, a state can be successfully achieving certain particular national interest. And I have seen some other questions whether soft powers is a sub-complement to the hard powers. No.
We will go by one. Let other speakers, one question, let the other speakers also answer, then we will take the second questions. Okay.
So this is my observation, ma'am.
Yeah. Sorry. I see Mr. Bhuban Bhatta has raised his hand, virtual hand. If you could kindly make your comment.
Yeah, ma'am. So talking about this, how can soft power discourse be incorporated in Nepal's foreign policy? Actually, it has already been incorporated. Time and again, we have been saying that the kind of power we are, the only tool we have got is diplomacy. That's one way of saying that we need soft power because we have limitations in relation to hard power, number one. And number two, talking about whether it is a success or failure, what we need to understand is soft power projection is basically a process. So what we are trying to do is we are trying to, convert our intangible resources into some sort of like valuable assets so that give us some outcomes in the long run. A country needs maybe years to create a kind of, image, a kind of, particular image that they can project later on. So it is basically a process. Success, failure, we can't say concretely whether it is a success or failure. Yes, of course, there are some contentions, but then it is a process, and it might take years for the outcomes. Thank you.
Thank you. There are two more questions I can see in the chat box. Can soft power and hard power supplement each other? And the next question is, why has Nepal not been able to diversify its soft power tools when countries like South Korea has been expanding its soft power tools in terms of its democracy economy? If the panelists could, I see a hand by Mr. Jaswal, if you could kindly make your point.
Ma'am, thank you. I will address the second questions regarding the complementarity of these two powers. What I read so far is that it is not about, these powers do not exist in hierarchy. And it does not exist, whether soft power is complementing or the supplementing, they work parallelly, what I personally believe. For example, if we say, generally we say people-to-people relation is very much needed to build a strong foundation of the diplomatic relations. In the meantime, state relations are very much needed. So we cannot make a distinction, okay, now people-to-people relations are contributing, state relations are somewhere either supplementing. So in that way, they are not in a positions to complement to each other. But what we generally agree is that when the soft powers relations are well endorsed and well managed, somehow they will provide you a longer durable solutions. For example, even Nepal will be a military capable enough to whom we are going to have a fight or war with China, with India, with Afghanistan. That is not the possibilities. So there are certain geopolitical positions that only one tool is left. That's our foreign friend, practitioner said that its discourse is already there in the law and the policies. So whether these issues have been really projected by the state agencies or not is the questions here. It's not about the supplement or the complement. What I do personally believe is about their work. They have their own importance and they work in a parallel and in a very similar and uniform way. Both has an equal importance. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you for your comments. I see a hand by Dr. Leela Nayacha. If you could kindly make your point.
Yes, ma'am. I do agree with many of the arguments like the presenters, my co-presenters have given. So not repeating with them, I would like to answer, why has Nepal not been able to diversify the soft power? The main thing is that, as Timil Sena sir has already mentioned, that in foreign policy, there is a points written about the soft power, using this soft power for Nepali foreign policies. But particularly in implementation, we do not set the specified, we do not have set a specified target. So this is the major lacking part. And so we should target, we should have the objective how to utilize them. And lastly, I would like to add on the Vijay Jaiswal sir's comment that how Buddhism can be the soft power. As you have said that, I would like to share my own personal experience. Like in a month before, I went to one Gumba, Lapchi Gumba, where I found 30 meditators from different parts of the countries, from Austria, from Russia, Lithuania, and Ladakh, Kashmir. So many meditators were there. So it is a soft power already. And the only thing is that the government is not taking it so much seriously as it should have, as it could have. Yes, we have, and there is a World Summit as well on Buddhism in Nepal, organized. And another thing is that in public diplomacy, everything is not conducted by the government. The non-government organization, as we are talking about NICE itself, an example we can say, and we person itself is also a visible thing, a visible element in personal diplomacy. So it is possible, very possible that we also could contribute for the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Leela. I see a hand by Mr. Timilsana. Sir, if you could kindly make your point.
Thank you, ma'am. Just I want to add one point only about how Nepalese soft power can use enhance. That sort of question is there. Probably the question is again, how can soft power discourse be incorporated in Nepal's foreign policy? Is soft power really a means to success in world politics? From Facebook, one question just we got it. Already, the discourse has already incorporated in Nepalese foreign policy, knowingly or unknowingly. From very initial phase to when even though building state and formation of state at that time also the soft power tools are very useful and used knowingly or unknowingly. However, the Trump just one point after 1990s. It is the fact we need to first of all remind it in mind. And just suppose the argument created by Leela ma'am, that the government has adopted the soft power is a essential and indistinct tool that should be used in Nepalese foreign policy, and just highlighted it as well. But the specific and goal-oriented vision, program, planning, and sustainable programming need to be included and need to be declared. Without having such declaration and plan, it would always remain in just objective only, and we will not measure it whether we achieved our objectives or not. And that's why one question also is there, like South Korea has one niche, another country has another type of niche. So that I would like to request, I would like to argue that in my observation, the niche diplomacy also we need to be formed. What is our Nepalese exactly the soft power that should be mobilized to international communities so that Nepal can have a benefit, can success or be helpful to get its national interest. And another thing just I want to add that it is not the matter of the superpower also, because soft power is the indistinct tool of this 21st century. The Confucius Institute of the Chinese, widespread all over the world. China is trying to expose its culture, language, and so forth from Confucius Institute. America itself has extended its various approaches from soft power tools. The missiles and tanks are less effective means in this era. With comparison to the soft power tool, MCC, and so forth, agendas of America are another dimension. That's why soft power is indistinct part and very influential and very important part of international relation, and it is a very important tool for achieving national interest of either the superpower or middle power or the small power. It doesn't matter. We need to keep it in mind. It is my observation, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. I will just pose a question. Any of the panelists can may be free to answer, whoever wants to. Nepal has been sending peacekeeping forces for long. Do you all see that this can be used as Nepal's soft power projection, especially when Mr. Timilsana has spoken about niche diplomacy, where it is you're focusing on particular area, and we all know how Norway has emerged as a peace broker in the international community. Do you all see Nepal not only the peacekeeping forces, but also other areas where Nepal can concentrate on this niche diplomacy and project a soft power projection in the international community. Because for a small country with limited resources, economic resources, I mean, it's not always possible to go into diverse areas or to diversify soft power very frequently. So how do you see these two aspects at the present in Nepal's foreign policy, soft power dimensions?
Thank you, ma'am. In soft power dimension, Nepal, just you take the name of Switzerland, you take the name of Norway. Yeah, as a peacekeeper of the international community, Norway has declared its niche as the peacekeeper of the whole community and as a good negotiator in the peacekeeping processes. Likewise, Africa has a kind of model in peacekeeping process as well. And Nepal also has a great opportunity to deal about peace process as well. However, it is very limited to expose in the international community. That is one of the things. But in my view, the two basic religion, one is the Buddhism and another is the Hinduism. Buddhism in the sense that already I have mentioned 10% population of the world still is in Buddhism, and the widespread Buddhist people should attract towards Nepal to promote its economic diplomacy, furthermore its tourism diplomacy and so forth. That is the one way. And another one is the already as I mentioned, Hindu temples are very essential and indistinct part of the Hindu religious faith. Those who are from Hindu background, they want to visit in the temples in their lifetime at a time, at least at a time, in Pashupatinath temple, Muktinath temple, like that. These are the places we need to be exposed to the international community as a niche diplomacy. And the natural beauty, the indistinct part, it is not less than the Switzerland if we compare the geographical dimension of the Nepal and its hilly regions, its mountain, its diversified culture, language, and so forth. These are very indistinct ingredients and capital of Nepal. That's why we need to expose as a niche development. That's why my point is religious, Buddhist, and Hindu, and tourism and with natural beauty. These are the two things we need to be exposed to the international community as niche diplomacy. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Any other panelists want to comment?
Yes, Madam, as you mentioned that the peacekeeping forces, yes, whenever even the army is the hard tool of the hard power, but when it's solved for the humanitarian agenda, it becomes the soft power. So it is very possible that the peacekeeping forces like Nepali army serve under the United Nations peacekeeping forces. So in that case, whenever the humanitarian crisis happens, Nepali army has served in that under the UN flag. So it is very essential and very possible to be the soft power for Nepal, I think. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Anyone else wants to comment? Because we have time, so anyone can elaborate on any other point also. If you are free, if you think you could not present it in your presentation, you can just make a point at the moment.
Ma'am, may I?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Thank you. So I do agree with what Leela ma'am has rightly said. Peacekeeping operations can be considered as a very effective tool for soft power projects of Nepal. But we must not forget, when we talk about the international relations today, we must not forget the fact about the rise of China. So what if there's an entire movement going to reform the United Nations system? So if there is a strong protest against how the United Nations Security Council or the entire structure that we have created in post-World War 1945 as a UN system, if there is a reformations there, then how this peacekeeping would be very sustainable? Because we are not looking soft powers for the 10 years, right? We're not looking for the soft powers for the 20 or the 30 years. We're trying to see those tools which do have a very long-lasting implications. For example, Timal Sinha has rightly said, Buddhism or the Hinduism can, but I still doubt. There is a growing percentage of people who are atheist. And I have seen very few, I have seen like significant numbers of people who do not literally do attach with these beliefs and these things, not only in Nepal, but abroad too. So if this is there, what would be the, what would be the talk of soft powers in Nepal after 100 years? Would these things remain? Because we have to think this thing also in that way. And another, I would like to say that how these things have been taught in other university. Because I had a chance to interact with the scholars who have been engaged in the international relations. Soft powers, since by name it's soft, are not given much more priority in compared to the hard powers. For example, Timal Sinha rightly said these military powers are not working in efficient way at the international level. But what about the Quad that's recently formed? If you see, if that is not true in itself, if we see the military defense budget, be it of India or a country like Nepal, we have been increasing time and again, but still in same time, what we are talking, Nepal's must be considered as like peace of zone, or the Buddhism must be a thing. So either we are going, or we are projecting ourselves in a wrong way, or whether we are trying to know the fact, military the strength, but still military along with the softness of the particular nations that will build a cohesive international relations. If go together, then that only can create the in true projections of Nepal's or any other soft power policy at the international levels. And even I have seen how even the discourse which have been built in the academic levels are not well rightly projected. So that is very much needed to consider it. But I do agree, peaceful, if there is not a strong reformations in the UN, then probably peace forces of Nepal can be considered as a durable and the sustainable tools of soft power projections in the international forum. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, there are several dimensions. When we talk of soft power, it is well accepted today that only soft power or only hard power will not be a solution or not be a way to look forward in international politics. It has never been and it will never be. I think that's how the new concept of smart power has come, which is a combination of hard and soft power. I think this debate will always be there. Since we have few more minutes, in the presentations, if I look from policy recommendation, because when you talk of soft power, there has to be a government intervention and also NGO sectors, like some of the speakers have pointed out. Two very pertinent recommendations have come from the presenters, from the panelists. The one is a setting up of a public diplomacy division within the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and more research centers, doing more focused, nuanced researches on, Nepal's soft power, being, looking into the various aspects and various parameters of soft power in a more nuanced way, in the sense of how they have actually helped in Nepal, rebuilding Nepal or building Nepal's image in the international community, and whether they have actually been able to bring any dividend to Nepal. Other than this, do any of the panelists have any suggestion how Nepal can actually brand itself in a more systematically and nuanced way, given its own limitations in the international arena in respect to the soft power dimensions? Any of the panelists can, come forward. It's not in any, but I didn't not mark to anyone particular.
I was expecting Bhuvan Bhatta sir will speak on this because he has mentioned very pertinent thing that whenever we have to send our populations abroad as a worker or as something else, the labor ministry or the manpower ministry, I would say, that they have to be pertinent, that let's very well skilled, very good people. I mean, how to say, not being the cheaper labor only sent to abroad, But this part is the major, how to say, the impressions that they will give to the foreign land is very sensitive one, I think.
Just a curiosity, I may be wrong, because most of the countries, the embassies all over the world, they have festivals marked for their country. I mean, projecting their own countries, the beauties and the plus advantages and the basically a soft power projection. Does the embassies of Nepal in abroad do similar kinds of activities? When you are speaking that, how many Nepali eminent personalities are known to the international community? Is there an effort from the government in the embassies around the world to have a day mark, maybe it in your national day or maybe some other festival day, where you are reaching out to the people in the countries abroad to project, both, the religious aspect of Nepal, the beauty of Nepal, food and culture of Nepal, festivals of Nepal. On that matter, as I said, as you are mentioned in your presentation also, the great personalities of Nepal who have made a contribution to Nepal and has been internationally recognized. Is there any effort from the government to do such of activities? I am not aware of it. I'm sorry for my ignorance if it is there. Just a query.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Of course, we have that practice. We celebrate national days, and whenever there are, exhibitions or the forums where we can showcase our culture or our our religion or something like that, we definitely participate in them. Of course, we have got budget allocated for economic diplomacy and tourism promotion purposes too. So from our part, we do our best. Whenever we find any platform, we participate in them. But obviously, due to pandemic, for the last 2 years, we have not been able to be visible in such forums. But then in several parts of the world where our embassies are there, they have been engaging in such activities. And I can see in participant lists, Mr. Madan Bhatra is there. He is sometimes referred as the Encyclopedia of Foreign Service in Nepal. So maybe if we could ask him to maybe comment few remarks.
Yeah, very important. Sir is there already. I saw. Yeah.
We would like to request sir if he could
come up. Our pleasure if sir could give some thoughts to us. Yeah.
Yes, surely, sir. If you could kindly make some of your observations, we would be enlightened, sir.
Is he there?
Probably.
So anyway, I don't think sir is there or. So yeah, talking about Dr. Leela was talking about this manpower thing. No, let me just be clear. What I'm trying to focus on is basically when you talk about projecting soft power, it's all comes down to people. I mean, how you create impression of your country abroad. So if you have millions of people who go out and work at menial level, then your perception of your country might not be that great. Sometimes people come to me and they tell your country was so great, I never expected that. And then I ask them why, and they tell me the obvious, as you can guess. I mean, their perception of our country could be there's nothing, no employment, it's all poverty and all that. But then if when they enter Nepal and go outside Kathmandu Valley, they realize how beautiful our country is, how resourceful it is. So my personal viewpoint is, it is very important to focus on who we are sending out. So for that, possibly if we could send skilled manpower, educated manpower outside, they will play a huge role in promoting Nepal. So yeah, that's my observation.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I see a virtual hand by Dr. Jaiswal. If you could kindly make your point.
Ma'am, I will make very brief points how government can use it a very effective tool. If,
sure.
As we know that Nepal is now federally divided, we have 7 provinces. So what government can do in different ministry, embassies abroad or different at the council level, they can establish a 7 different desks. That there would be economic cost attached to it, but if that can give a broader contributions to the Nepal economy or the foreign policy priorities, and those 7 desks will provide each and every these tools to whosoever are approaching to those embassies. So it is not only, this is not only the job that the like central government will be doing it. If the 7 desks would provide a much more effective information to the investors, to the tourists, to XYZ whosoever, in that way, in longer term, that can be a very effective way while projecting the soft powers in the foreign land map. This is what I thought to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I don't see any more questions in the chat box, so I can take this opportunity to conclude the session. I take this opportunity to thank all the panelists for their wonderful presentation, and I'm sure there's a lot of food for thoughts. The whole concept of soft power has been looked in a critical way also, which I think has made the discourse much more lively. All the presenters have brought out the nuances of Nepal's soft power policy and how it can help in actually branding Nepal. It is no doubt that there are limitations for a country like Nepal to project its soft power in a much more effective or a much more nuanced way, but it is well accepted that Nepal has an immense opportunity in its soft power dimensions, and some of the recommendations have come very nicely, and I'm sure NICE would, when they bring out their report on this conference, they will highlight these recommendations, like creating a separate division about public diplomacy in Nepal's foreign ministry, creating separate desk for in the embassies, and 7 desks in the embassies dealing with all the issues on all the the advantages or the beauties and the issues in all the 7 federal provinces. And also, the need for more research centers to work on soft power dimensions. And in the presentation, the role of religion in projecting Nepal's foreign policy have been highlighted by most of the speakers. There are issues, but these are the things these are the strengths Nepal has, and which needs to be inculcated and presented or branded, as said by all the presentators, in a more nuanced way to the international community. And I hope Nepal, hope NICE would also take initiative to arrange a conference on Buddhism and bring out some more scholars working on Buddhism in Nepal, how it can be more used more systematically in projecting Nepal's soft power in international dimensions. I think some of the issues which I'm sure NICE can also take forward. And it has been a wonderful session with various issues being highlighted, which Nepal has to address, and pointing some of the strength Nepal has in its soft power dimensions. And I'm sure we all benefited from this session, and we have enough food of thought to ponder upon now in this issue. With these words, I would like to conclude the session. Once again, thank you all the panelists for their wonderful presentation, and also NICE Nepal for organizing such an important session on Nepal's foreign policy. If the organizers have something to comment, they might. Thank you so much. It was an honor to be part of this.